I'd like to be remembered as an innovator. It's picking the rules that you break that are the ones that will add value to others and add value to society. And that really, to me, is about innovation.
Hi guys. So today we're going to be discussing what everybody's been talking about lately, which is the recent submarine tragedy. And we're just going to be going over why it's so popular, some interesting facts about the case. We're going to be talking about what the Titanic director had to say about it, if going to the Titanic in general is dangerous, and if the company has liability for knowingly having an unsafe submarine. And so let's get into it. So there's a lot of people on Twitter I noticed talking about how, it's almost like their fault because this is like, it's such a dangerous thing. This is the type of risk that comes with going on a submarine. And so the thing is, it actually seems like I would argue that the company has a lot of explaining to do. And it's sad. It's a bummer, There are a lot of people who are, so upset with the CEO and think that, it was just so negligent how the company was treating such a very serious safety hazard, a potential safety hazard. And it's sad because when you look at videos of the CEO, he's very excited. He thinks he's doing something groundbreaking. And, he thinks it's safe, but at the same time, he's acknowledging that there are structural, almost things that they skipped and that, it's ingenuitive that they're doing it a different way.
It's not invention. Innovation is when you take an invention and you make it, accepted broadly. And maybe think of ocean exploration the way everybody thinks of space exploration. Because this is where we're going to find the strange new life form.
At the same time, he ignored what other engineers were telling him and what seems to be just almost common sense in the submarine engineering community and just engineering in general. And so James Cameron, the director of Titanic, talks about this. So again, there's a lot of people that are like, why were they going down there anyways? That's obviously just going to get you killed. Well, he's actually been down there 30 times safely, over 30 times. I'm assuming when he was, filming the Titanic, and he talks about it. And he also explains how even his submarine that he went in was also a little bit, not regulated. It hadn't been approved under the typical safety features, and even so, he had spent 7 years putting it together, talking with the engineer, and it was only a single-seater. So what he was saying is, although it didn't meet the safety standard the same way OceanGate didn't, he would never put that risk onto other people unless it had been gone through all of those rigorous safety standards. And so it's just a tragedy all around. And the thing is, though, it sounds like it was very avoidable. And it sounds like, and even one of the other victims, he had gone before as well, multiple times down to the Titanic. So from what it sounds like, James Cameron talks about how, it's basically a fundamental concept in the engineering community that even if something made of steel goes down multiple times, each time, again and again and again, there's more risk, especially with the carbon material. There's something with degradation failure. And so it sounds like this issue was, just actually very avoidable, and it was more a case of negligence. So I know people are almost blaming the victims, but at the same time, you could argue maybe they didn't do too much background checking into the specific company, but that company had gone down multiple times in the same submarine, and they didn't have an issue. So it's sad. And, James Cameron did actually bring up a comparison and just say it's shocking how similar this tragedy was to the actual Titanic tragedy, because it's a similar story in a sense of, the captain was told not to keep going, that it was dangerous, and he was basically warned about the iceberg. and the captain still went, you know, straight ahead. He risked his life and everybody else's, and as an end result, he and many other people died. And, you know, a lot of people are just shocked that even all of these years later, there are still, you know, people who, first of all, have money, who you would think would, like, I don't know, be on like the top highest quality, you know, building material, the highest quality ship, but they still were, you know, dying like everybody else did in the Titanic, where, you know, money was not able to stop them from just the errors of the people in charge. And I think that's like really important to acknowledge, because, you know, it doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or if you're the person putting coal in the Titanic to make it pump. No matter what, whoever's in charge of you, whoever your boss is, one minor error could be a matter of life and death. And, you know, it's just the unfortunate thing is, it's like James Cameron saying, you know, it's okay to take that risk when, you know, it's you and you're on your own. But I mean, you know, they're talking about, oh, is it safe? Like, should we stop having people go down there at all? But to me, it just sounds like, how is there not regulations? Like, obviously this would have happened, you know? I mean, it's like, what? Like, nobody should be able to, it's like having a skydiving company, in my opinion. It's like, you should have like very rigorous standards that you have to meet, you know, like, or at the very least, like what James Cameron was saying, like, if you're going to have a company, I mean, there hasn't been a whole lot said about, you know, suing the company or anything like that. And actually, I was pretty shocked, because the stepson, not the one that went into the Blink 182 concert, and we'll get into that more also, but the other stepson, he was just talking about how, you know, the stepson of the dad, who was a Titanic explorer, and he had been a bunch of times, and he was very nice about it, you know, saying like, you know, my dad understood these risks.
Boy, I think it's kind of what you said in terms of being fearless, right? I mean, there's so much of the discussion now is about risk, you know, and the risks that everyone took going on board, and the risks that, you know, everyone has, just, you know, in terms of getting in a submersible period, right? There's so much risk in this world, in my opinion. And I think, you know, going into this, he knew, you know, the risks that were possible with this expedition. But again, he was fearless, and, you know, he was just so loving. And it's not only just his family. I saw the way he interacted with, you know, coworkers as well, and other friends in the community. He was just such a well-respected guy that handled everything, you know, so professionally, whether it was, you know, Titanic related, expedition related, or it was just everyday life. I'm just so impressed by, you know, the big heart, you know, he has, and sense of humor he brought. And it's just a truly devastating day to hear this news.
If it was me, oh my gosh, I would be I would be pissed off. I mean, and it's right to be pissed off. Like, their parents lost their lives. I mean, there's a 19-year-old kid who's dead. And I mean, anyone involved in that company really should have known better, or at least anyone who was aware that they were directly ignoring like actual engineers, like, advice on how to run it. I don't know. It's just, it's so crazy to me when people think they know more than people who have gone to school for years and years and years and are experts in a subject. I do the same thing where I'm arguing with people and I'm referencing like things that people have studied for years, or things that, you know, and people don't care. Like, they will do whatever they want with their kids. They will do whatever they want with their pets. They will ignore any advice if they think what they're doing is correct. And I think it just goes to show that, you know, it's a similar issue that happened here. It's like, how deadly is, you know, confirmation bias? And I'm just curious to see what will happen and how much money. I mean, these people are billionaires. Like, I can imagine, you know, not that their families need $1 million to survive, but I mean, that's a huge loss, and any life in general is a loss, even if they were broke. But I mean, I would be pissed off. Like, it's not like, you know, this was like a $30 ticket or something. These people paid like almost $300,000, And these companies, like, they were using very like strange products. Like, I'll include a video that says the specifics.
And I've broken some rules to make this. I think I've broken them with logic and good engineering behind me. The carbon fiber and titanium, there's a rule you don't do that. Well, I did.
Something like that was off about the carbon, I don't know, like just very silly kind of shortcuts almost. I don't know why they're doing that. The CEO was talking about it in the sense of like, he wanted to be remembered as someone like ingenuitive and stuff.
I'd like to be remembered as an innovator. I think it was General MacArthur said, you're remembered for the rules you break. And I've broken some rules to make this. I think I've broken them with logic and good engineering behind me. The carbon fiber and titanium, there's a rule you don't do that. Well, I did. It's picking the rules that you break that are the ones that will add value to others and add value to society. And that really, to me, is about innovation. It's not invention. Innovation is when you take an invention and you make it, accepted broadly. And maybe think of ocean exploration the way everybody thinks of space exploration. Because this is where we're going to find the strange new life forms. And the future of mankind is underwater. It's not on Mars. We're not going to have a base on Mars.
But it's sad because his definition of ingenuity was just ignoring like the common, like what we know commonly about like engineering in general. And so it's just sad all around because obviously his intentions were good, like when you watch the videos, he's very excited about it. He thinks he's doing something good.
How about you yourself? Are you going to be a part of this?
Oh yeah. That's one of the benefits of being the CEO. I'm going to be. I get to do the first dives and most interesting dives.
But at the same time, it's not a matter of how, dangerous, like this implosion can happen with anything, any submarine, and that's what, when people are blaming them, the victims and stuff. But realistically, it actually was a potentially very easy, safe trip, and it just sounds like a lot of just bad ideas on their part. I don't know. I mean, it's just sad. It's like, I haven't even finished my degree yet, and I can tell you right now, if an engineer told me that the product I was working on to go down thousands of miles deep into the sea wasn't safe, I certainly would not be like, it's ingenuitive, I'm doing something different, that's just like, and so that's where it goes down to, I don't necessarily think they should like prevent people from going down. I think it just should be, we need to have better regulations, obviously. So anyways, and there's actually another submarine almost victim. I know that doesn't exactly sound like it makes sense. He basically was in a similar scenario where he was stuck for 30 minutes. And he basically just shares about how scary it was for him and just his experience. And so this whole week he's been reliving it, and he was just so scared for the victims that, that's what they were going through. And so I think that's part of why this case was so popular, because, I mean, true crime is so popular. People seem to really like the adrenaline of, almost feeling like you're in the case, like the case is coming to life. And, obviously you wouldn't do a murder, but, it puts you in those scenarios where you get to feel this like roller coaster of emotions. And so I think that's part of why people were so, enamored by this, because when it first came up, the subject on social media, it was like, these people have estimated like 96 hours or whatever it was to be found. And so there's this countdown being posted, and it's like, you're just checking your phone every minute, wondering if there's any updates, like what's gonna happen? Are they gonna be found alive? And so now it's kind of coming down on the adrenaline, and it's just more of a sad scenario. But at the same time, the victims were very lucky in a sense of, we had all been thinking that they were just slowly suffocating. And so that's part of why this case is so, profound right now, I think. I mean, there were people upset because there's also a migrant ship of 700 people who went missing around the same time. And it didn't have half as much media coverage, and so people were talking about that. But and they're comparing it to just saying like it's because they're billionaires. I would say I do think that even if the tickets were like $30, it still would have been really like national news, national coverage, just due to the nature of the case, just due to the profound sense of, oh my gosh, 36 hours, oh my gosh, there's only 2 hours left, they haven't found them. And then so now, you know, of course it's dwindling down, but even so, people are still very interested in it, very talking about it. And so anyways, I thought it was interesting to see the submarine survivor talk about this and just to go into more depth about his experience, because that poor man, he knew exactly what they would have been feeling if they had been stuck, since he got caught in the propeller or something of the Titanic when he was doing his exploration. So that's like such a specific thing for him to be triggered, you know, like that's like his exact trauma. So imagine like he was there for 30 minutes and he said it felt like hours, like they weren't sure if they would get unstuck. So seeing this, you know, he was just reliving, imagining if his situation was hours and hours and hours and they're slowly suffocating.
The ship operated beautifully. I mean, the ship that I was on, this is a big difference, Heather. That's a good question. Because the ship that I was on, a submersible, was a serious machine built for a serious purpose. It was built originally for scientific research and had been tested over time. So even though we had this collision, thank God, we didn't breach the hull. We could have, and then it would have been, you know, game over right away. But the hull withstood the impact. Imagine that. And then we had the communication, although it didn't help us because the mothership couldn't do anything for us. In the end, it was really the skill of the pilot. I'm really grateful to the Russians. I'm especially grateful to Victor, our pilot, for getting us out. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here talking to you. I'd still be down there 2.5 miles under the water.
Now, I personally do think people were saying like, oh, like it's good news, it was an implosion. And they're saying it's good news because, as everyone else will explain to you, it means that they had a painless death, which is good. You know, it's much better than the alternative that everyone was thinking of, like, you know, a long, drawn out, painful death. Who knows if they're killing the CEO because he was there, like, while they slowly die. And, you know, there's just so much, you know, potential sadness, like, if they had died in that way. So I do think, though, if they had been stuck, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like they could have been found. So I do feel like that would have been a better alternative if that had been, you know, they just got stuck somewhere. Apparently they were able to send cameras down with lights and stuff. So I think they, you know, would have potentially been able to find them within the time. And the only reason they didn't was because, you know, there was nothing to find. And another part of the case that's interesting that people are talking about is, you know, well, they're saying it was an implosion, but before that they were saying there was like pounding, and that was almost like in a Morse code fashion of the pounding. And so the actually mortician, and I'll include her video, she talked about how, you know, she feels like it's ghosts, and that sometimes when she's doing like medical exams on dead bodies and stuff, she'll hear banging and stuff like that. So now there's an element of, you know, another creepy aspect.
Not find any human body parts. When a submarine implodes, it crushes inwards like a soda can due to the intense pressures of the water. And when I tell you their deaths were instant, I really mean it. I'm dead serious. It happens so fast that their brains don't even have time to register what's happening or even sense pain. Like when you crush an egg with your bare hands. The pressure is so great that the bodies will liquefy. But is anybody else wondering what happened about the banging noises? You know how they said that they picked up noises of banging? Like a distress signal that was being sent out and they picked it up on their sonar. Does anybody else remember that? Well, I'm convinced that it was the ghosts down there and that they're mad we were in their space. I say this coming from a place of experience because without a doubt I would be in the morgue at 3 a.m. and the ghosts would be banging on things, metal tables, loud noises to get my attention. If you weren't a believer in ghosts, congratulations, you are now.
There's just a lot of creepiness to the story, and it's surreal watching the CEO as well. Like, he's just saying, like, you know, I want to be remembered as this, like, ingenuitive person. And it's sad because it's quite the opposite now, but, you know, at least he doesn't know that. But anyways, so there's just a lot of elements to it that are very dark, very, you know, just twisted. And I think that's why people like it, honestly. I mean, I myself, like, get overwhelmed by crime and like SUV and Law and Order, whatever. I don't really like being surrounded by that kind of stuff too much, and even I was very, very enamored with the case, very like checking what happened. Like when I would wake up, it would be what I would think about. I couldn't sleep because I would be imagining like them lost at sea. And you know, the thing is, like, I'm sure like this has happened where people, you know, get lost at sea and they, you know, have that kind of death. So it's just very frightening to think about. And I'm happy that they didn't go through that, but it is also very important to discuss like the negligence that went down, because, you know, some people don't see it like that, or they think that it just came with the risk. But again, like the director of the Titanic, James Cameron, he seems to be very knowledgeable on the subject, and I think what he has to say, you know, speaks volume. So I'll include that also.
James, I know you were talking today, you were struck by the similarity of what happened with the Titanic disaster to, you know, unfortunately what has happened here with warnings going out beforehand. Talk to me a little bit about the irony.
Well, it is. Look, people are fascinated by Titanic. They've been fascinated by that story since it sank. And yes, there's the whole, you know, all the millionaires that died and all that sort of thing. But to me, the big irony is that the Titanic sank because of bad seamanship. The captain was warned, and he took a decision to go full speed into a known ice field that he had Marconigram, you know, telegrams in his pocket, warning about the ice ahead. And on a moonless night where they couldn't see anything, they just steamed full speed ahead. And I kind of feel that that's what happened here. I feel that this was such a preventable tragedy. We've never had a tragedy like this in the entire history of deep submergence, deep diving. You have these, you know, highly certified systems like Alvin at Woods Hole, which Bob is very familiar with. Even the Russian submersibles that I dove with, every 5 years they had to be reclassified and recertified, and so on. And you have all these legitimate deep diving operations around the world, and even most of the tourist operations around the world use certification from, let's say, ABS, the American Bureau of Shipping, and this particular outfit didn't do that. I had deep concerns about the technology that they were using, composite fiber wound filament hull, which I don't believe has any place in deep submergence. And I know a thing or two about you know, the engineering that goes into subs. I designed and built my own sub and went, you know, at one point 10 years ago, went 3 times deeper than Titanic at the Challenger Deep. So, you know, it's all just engineering, and these are understood and known problems. The last thing somebody should be thinking about when they get into a sub to pay to go deep as a tourist or as a, you know, what do you call it, like a lay explorer, they shouldn't have to worry about the sub that they're in. This is just engineering, and it's the 21st century.
Another weird aspect about this case is people are showing viral Simpsons moments where they're also saying, you know, the Simpsons predicted it again, and they're showing a submarine moment, and I'll include that, and you can make of that what you will. So that's another thing that people are talking about a lot, that they found weird about the case. So a lot of weird stuff altogether. I also wanted to add that a lot of people are raising concerns because they saw the wireless controller that they were using was a Logitech, like $30, silly looking video game controller, but apparently that is common with some war, like military vehicles or something I was reading. So it's actually not that crazy, but there were definitely a lot of other safety concerns for sure.
The most haunting thing about it is when you look at the news, and open my laptop, on social media, on television, it was everywhere, and they'd show pictures of the people who lost their lives, and all I could see when I saw that father and son was myself and my son. That could have been us in that picture.
And Sean, I mean, obviously, the other young man there, he was 19, you're 20, right? I mean, it is eerie, the parallels. What did you first think when you learned what happened?
When the news initially broke, before the news initially broke, when we were considering actually going on the submarine ourselves, one of the safety concerns I had before getting on was literally about the structural integrity of the submarine. Before we got on, I saw a video of Stockton explaining how the submarine worked with the remote and everything like that, and I saw a lot of red flags with it, and it was only meant for 5 people, and I just didn't think that it could survive, going that low into the ocean. So ultimately I ended up warning my dad about it, and he ended up agreeing with me, and when we tried to ask Stockton questions, he kind of brushed it off a little bit. So it's kind of red flags from the start. And then when the story came out, on the first day, initially we thought that the first thing we thought is that the submarine imploded, because it's very difficult for a submarine of that size to get to the bottom of the ocean and not implode. But that was the first thing that went through our head, was it either imploded or it got stuck under the Titanic on the first day.
Right, and I know, you had these concerns. Jay, what's interesting is you had an exchange with Stockton Rush in April. He says, quote, have space on mission 1 and 2 last minute, price is $150 per person. You reply, I'll check my schedule and see if I can make it work. 3 days later, he says, any luck? And at one point, I know that he went to Vegas. He actually traveled to Vegas to see you, to try to meet with you, to close the deal. Now, Jay's sitting here talking about red flags. What about that trip raised a red flag to you? I mean, he came all the way to see you to try to get you to buy these tickets.
Yeah. Stockton, I think his heart was in the right place, and he really was passionate about his project, and he believed everything he was saying. But one of the things that concerned me was he told me he was flying in to see me, and he was landing at North Las Vegas Airport, which is an odd selection. Most people that come in privately come into either McCarran, which is now Harry Reid International, or they come into Henderson Executive. And I asked him why, and he said he was coming in on a 2-seater experimental plane that he built. And I started to think about, he's coming in on a 2-seater experimental plane to pitch me out to go on a 5-seater experimental sub that he built down to the ocean floor to see the Titanic. And he has a different risk appetite than I do. I'm a pilot. I have my helicopter pilot's license. I wouldn't get into an experimental aircraft.
I mean, Sean, when you think about what happened here and how close you were to being on this, right? I mean, I know that you all thought about it. Did you ever convey to Stockton Rush safety concerns? I mean, I know at one point, Jay, you talked about a friend of Sean's who was worried about things like a squid hitting it, and he dismissed those concerns. But did you talk to him about some of your serious structural issues and worries that you had?
Yeah, he came out to Las Vegas in March to see me. We met a couple of times in person, but the March trip, he came out. He actually took me through the Titanic exhibition at the Luxor, and then we had lunch after. And we talked about the expedition that he wanted to go on, and he walked me through it. And then we talked about the safety concerns. And I think he had so much passion for the project that he was blinded by it. He wasn't objective, and he didn't look at things that I saw and that others saw that were problematic, because it just didn't fit his narrative.
Sean,
it's unfortunate,
it's tragic. And Sean, I began by saying you and your dad are the kinds of people who would consider something like this. You're already in a small group, right, of people who find this to be something that could, instill curiosity as opposed to, right? So where are you now? Has this changed how you see it? Would you ever consider doing a trip like this again now that you've seen this happen?
I mean, it's very sad and tragic that I kind of predicted this outcome. My dad was very excited to go, and he was very excited to take me because I was obsessed with the Titanic as a little kid, and I was really looking forward to doing it. But the second I saw the submarine and how it worked, I knew that one of the first outcomes, me and my friend Simon, actually, that friend that everyone was talking about, we both knew immediately that this submarine couldn't make it to the bottom of the ocean. And it's sad that our prediction came true. But as far as us doing something like this ever again, I mean, the ocean is scarier than space. We know more about space than we do about the ocean. And it's definitely not something we're ever going to be trying to do again. You know what I mean? It just was not for us,
Another strange aspect of this case is one of the billionaire's stepsons reportedly started off acting a little bit strange. He went to a Blink-182 concert while his dad was missing, and the next thing you know, he was fighting with Cardi B somehow. And now people are accusing him of actually being a stalker and threatening to shoot up a EDM concert. So overall, there's a lot of elements to this story that are almost hard to believe. And of course, it's also so tragic learning more about the 19-year-old who unfortunately passed away. So I make sure to include the people that I'm referencing, you know, James Cameron, a submarine survivor of a similar experience, you know, a lot of engineers who know a lot about submarines kind of talking about why the structural integrity was so questionable on their part. And yeah, and then so I'm also going to go over, you know, there's a lot of what makes a viral video I talk about a lot. It is a lot to do with the comments. And so when people are arguing about things, it makes a great viral video. That's why you see a lot of political things be viral, when people feel the need to comment their opinion. So there are a lot of people on Twitter, for example, on Facebook, for example, they are making memes about this, and I'll include some just for reference. And so there are a lot of people who are upset by this, who, you know, they don't think that anybody should be joking about it. It's a very serious matter. It's not really funny. And there are also a lot of people who are low income that feel very, and not even just low income, but people just that feel like, you know, there aren't ethical billionaires, and that, you know, these people just had so much money that, you know, they don't have sympathy because it was such a dangerous event in the first place. And people will say, you know, this could happen to your family, you should be sympathetic and empathetic to their suffering. And then people reply, you know, no, this couldn't happen to my family, you know, I could never afford a ticket like that. You know, I think it's good to, you know, at least look into it a little bit before forming that opinion. At first I was kind of leaning towards, you know, I give billionaires the benefit of the doubt a lot. I used to think Elon Musk was really smart before I kind of looked a little more into it. And, you know, I wasn't aware of things like his parents being involved in emerald mines and just stuff like that, where it's just so unethical, where if you are a billionaire, you should definitely acknowledge, like, this is how I came up, you know, and make sure you're paying all of your people who are working for you living wages. Like, it's ridiculous when there are billionaires and they're not paying people fairly, you know, et cetera, et cetera. From what I saw about these victims, it does seem like they were all pretty kind-hearted. Nobody had a bad word to say. So, you know, that's always hard because, of course, it would be easier to, you know, if they were bad people or something, but it sounds like they were all very sweet, you know. And another aspect that's very talked about right now is, you know, one of the aunts released information that apparently the 19-year-old boy really did not want to go on this trip. He was very concerned about what would happen, very scared and anxious about it, rightfully so, apparently. And he was just going to be a nice son because it was Father's Day, and his dad was like very passionate about it.
The son of a billionaire who died on the Titan submersible was reportedly terrified about making the trip. This according to his aunt, Asma Dawood. She tells NBC News that Suleiman Dawood went on the underwater excursion, which was bound for the Titanic wreckage, to please his father, Shahzada Dawood. According to Azame, Shahzada had a passion for the Titanic from a young age, so she was not surprised that he had purchased tickets to travel on the Ocean Gate vessel for himself and his son. But now, Azame says Suleiman was only going on the trip because of his dad. She explained that since the voyage was planned on Father's Day, Suleiman reportedly decided to go on the trip reluctantly after having shared with a relative that he wasn't very up for it and felt terrified. Before the U.S. Coast Guard and Ocean Gate announced their deaths on Thursday, Asme revealed that she was anxiously awaiting answers and feared the worst. She compared it to being caught in a bad film with a countdown and you didn't know what you're counting down to, and added that she found it difficult to breathe when thinking of them. In a statement to NBC News, the Dawood family thanked search teams for their untiring efforts and asked the public to keep their family in their prayers amid their unimaginable loss.
So it's just all together very sad, you know. I hope they were able to at least see it and to have fun, and that there wasn't any bad last moments, you know. So anyways, I would say, like, looking into it more, and even the people on Twitter who are making fun of it, a lot of them are saying, like, they do have empathy for the young boy. I would say, looking into it, and I'll include videos also, the kids and everybody was just saying positive thing after positive thing about all the victims. So it sounds like although they were rich, they weren't necessarily bad people. And so anyways, that's another aspect of why this case is so talked about, as well as people being upset about, you know, the migrants not having the same effort put into looking into their missing boat, where there was 700 people, so much more than the 5. And then you have other people who are talking about how, you know, oh, well, they were migrants, this is their fault, you know. And then of course that upsets other people because, you know, I mean, they're the ones telling you to be empathetic over the billionaires, but then they're having no empathy for people just because they were migrants. I don't know, like, if you're going to think that you should be empathetic in a scenario where it's the billionaires or whatever, and even if they're rich, I would think that you would be empathetic in any scenario, including, you know, who knows why these people were fleeing, who knows if they're doing it for their kids or if their kids were in a dangerous situation. So I just find it weird when, I would say, like, the people who are so empathetic to these billionaires, they should extend that same sympathy, you know. It is weird to make the argument like, oh, be empathetic for, you know, the submarine situation, but then it's like, oh yeah, migrants, they deserve that, you know. It's a little bit hypocritical, I'd say, you know. It's kind of like, are we going to be empathetic to a situation because somebody died, and we're going to have some level of understanding if they weren't a bad person, you know, inherently bad, you know. I mean, again, being an immigrant does not make you inherently bad. So, I mean, until you know more about the situation, you should probably also be having that same level of empathy you're telling those people to have, you know, who are making the memes and stuff. And so anyways, that's, you know, kind of the basics of this subject, but it's very, you know, it's very sad. It's a very tragic situation, and it's very, you know, unsatisfying. I mean, everyone was really hoping that they would be found alive and that it could be some, you know, miracle story and something really great. And again, I do think, like, if it was an implosion, which was the worst case scenario, I mean, of course there were other instances where if they'd been stuck in there, it may have been hard as well. But again, I think since they had the location so narrowed down of where they were going, if they were stuck, let's say, in the, like how he was stuck in the propeller, they would know exactly where they are and hopefully be able to get them out. So, you know, it's just a bummer all around, but just wanted to, you know, give people details because everybody's asking and they don't really know, and people are saying so many different things. So that's basically the summary of this situation, and thank you guys for watching. Feel free to comment your thoughts below and what you thought of everything, and if you think they're gonna get in trouble, if OceanGate's gonna get a lawsuit, and yeah, just your thoughts on anything. So thank you guys. Bye. Thank you guys so much for listening, and feel free to comment your thoughts and subscribe. Thank you.